What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Filip Latocha, and today we've got a crazy wisdom tooth removal story, kind of tangent to running, but it does have some other underlying things that have happened that have impacted my running, such as what this is and me just kind of explaining what's going along with that. And yeah, we'll just get right into it. So before we get started, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're already subscribed to the channel, watching the content, thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. Let's get into it, I guess. So, first things first, I mean, I think a lot of people around the world at some point in their lives, not everyone, have to get wisdom teeth pulled at some point. A lot of people usually have wisdom teeth and they just don't need to get them yanked for whatever reason. I, in this case, have 3. But I only need to get 2 yanked, which is one that was just kind of sitting inside and it just impacted on the left side of my mouth, and one that was already out but it was severely decayed. So, now that I started, my first time, like, full-time employment job, you finally get the insurance, you finally got some good dental, I'm thinking, okay, let's get this over with once and for all. It's a little bit late, but, at this point, just do it, right? So I go to the dentist. The whole procedure literally takes me about 20 minutes to do, and it felt like nothing that anyone ever described to me. People would say I would be walking around with like cotton ball of gauze all day long. I was gonna go, be sedated. It was just gonna be miserable after the wisdom teeth removal. And like, to be completely honest, the entire procedure took me like 25 minutes. I mean, minus the anesthesia, which, they had to inject, and then it was done in like 10-15 minutes. I was completely numb. And then, they pulled out the teeth in like under 3-4 minutes each side. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, cool. I'm going back to work immediately after this. This is great. So, that's all done. They get stitched up. I get sewn up, and I'm ready to go home. And, when you get your wisdom teeth removed, you do kind of want like a parent or guardian with you or somebody just there. So my mom was with me when, of course, I got my teeth yanked. And I'm at the front desk after getting them pulled, and I'm like ready to schedule something else because I guess I had like some other work that I need to get done dentally. And at this point, I start experiencing a bit of lightheadedness, and I do start feeling my vision go gray. And here's something that has happened to me a couple of times in my life, usually after I see my own blood or something a little bit more traumatic of that scale. And what I mean by that is like syncope or syncopathy. I think it's syncope. That's how it's pronounced. But that's just basically the idea of like fainting after some sort of traumatic event that you experience, whether it's like a surgery or, yeah, again, you see your own blood or something like that. And basically, I'm about to have an episode, and I see myself at the counter, and I'm like, okay, there's somebody sitting at this chair, like, directly on the right of me. There's another chair right next to him. If I can just sit down, everything's going to be cool. And, like, all I remember at this point was turning around and seeing the chair, and then that's it. Like, I black out at that point. So I've effectively fainted while standing up at, this position. And I do remember for maybe that moment, there must have been a dream that was like 2 or 3 seconds long. I don't remember what it was about exactly, but I do remember waking up, basically looking at like 4 people surrounding me. I don't recognize anyone's face. I see that my legs are on top of a chair and they're getting shaken, which means, the blood is probably in my legs kind of pooled up. And now this is the idea of just getting it back to like my brain, back to my upper body. And yeah, effectively it's pretty clear that I fainted, but I didn't know the extent of how bad my episode was until I realized that like my mom was next to me holding a cloth basically on my forehead. And at this point I like realized, I'm like, oh, did I faint? And like, yeah, you fainted. I feel the cloth, I feel the ice pack now, and my mom's telling me like, you bumped your head. And I remember at this point being like, is it kind of bad? Because like I don't, that's kind of bad if you bump your head. And she's like, you're going to be fine, it's a bit of a scar here. So at this point, I knew I kind of messed up big time, not being able to react quickly enough to my fainting episode in this particular instance. Because usually if something like this happens, the idea is you kind of are aware of the signs. And what you're supposed to do, you just lay on your back like immediately so the blood doesn't drop from your head, but you can like at least flatten out, your body so the blood doesn't like kind of vanish from the necessary pieces to keep you, awake and conscious. So, at this point, I didn't bump my nose, I didn't bump my teeth, I didn't like bump my eye or anything like that. I'm not paralyzed, so everything's looking great, to be completely honest with you. Minus the fact that I do have like this giant gash on my forehead, and it is bleeding quite profusely. And there's kind of a panic in the dental office, but at this point I'm like, guys, listen, I fainted, I'm awake now, we're all good, it's not going to happen again. So of course they give me like a little bit of sugar to eat basically after you get the wisdom teeth yanked. And now here's the problem, is like I can't eat it normally because I'm missing my teeth, so I'm like chewing with my front teeth. I take a little sip of like grape juice that they give me, and like I almost puke, but I'm like dry heaving. So this is probably one of the first signs that I'm experiencing that kind of signal that I probably got a concussion, from basically standing up completely straight to falling side of the head, kind of face first into like tile ground. And here's the thing, is like I'm never going to be able to experience the pain sensation of doing that from a natural standing like conscious point, because I passed out when it basically happened. So at this point, we do decide that I'm not taking an ambulance. Like my mom's gonna drive me to a hospital, and we're gonna get this stitched up. We're gonna check everything to make sure I'm perfectly okay. And that's kind of just where we're playing from at this point. So now we're on our way to one of these hospitals that's like maybe 10-15 minutes away from the dental office. And now the day obviously went from, cool, I'm going to be returning to work in about 30 minutes or less after this wisdom tooth operation, to, great, I'm going to the hospital and I'm probably getting stitches for like the second time today in my life. And, we get to the hospital, they check me in almost immediately, they take vitals, they take CT scan, they just go through everything, they give me a blood test, the IVs, all of it. I'm in a hospital bed, effectively, at this point. And we're there for a little bit of time, and, there's a physician's assistant who's kind of just, like, walking us through some stuff, telling us things that are going on, telling me what's up, I'm kind of explaining some things to him, and, yeah, basically it was just a huge, kind of a blur at the not the dental office, at the hospital. And thankfully, like, I'd be in so much trouble right now if my mom wasn't there to like at least navigate me through like the medical system and like kind of their business model and kind of their politics of how they work things, because I'd be in like obvious serious trouble. I'd be probably there for like much longer than I wanted to, and like I'll explain that in a second as I start explaining some of these other things. So obviously, we're there mainly to make sure that everything's cool. I don't have any like broken pieces of my skull. I don't have like internal bleeding, and we get myself stitched up. That's like what we're there for at this point, because this is, from a cybersecurity perspective, like this is the immediate thing we need to contain, is to stop the bleeding. So, they do all the tests on me. I do end up having a high blood pressure at this point, and I usually don't have a high blood pressure. And my guess is, again, based on everything that happened, I just got my wisdom teeth yanked, so I have like this traumatic event. There's kind of like pulsating in my mouth because, there's like still kind of bleeding despite the stitches. There's anesthesia. I just fainted. I hit my head on the ground, so like everything's kind of a mess. So of course my vitals are not going to be coming back as usual or as normal in this particular instance. Like obviously my heart rate is still a little bit high. Now I'm like riding at about 60 to 65 beats per minute when I'm usually about 50, etc., etc., So they've taken 2 EKGs on me at this point, because the first one wasn't coming back correctly, and the second one they finally got it when they had me like laying on my back. So the important thing to note here is that as runners, and here, we should probably definitely preface this again. I'm not a medical like doctor or some kind of like medical athlete professional or anything like that, but there's a couple common sense items that should be addressed here. So obviously they know I'm a runner. They know I do about 50 to 60 miles of running a week. I bike, I swim, I lift weights, I do all that stuff. So all things considered, the EKG is, simply put, never going to come back normal. It's always going to come back with like some sort of like abnormal large heart, I guess, conditions or symptoms, because that's just what we are, right? We're athletes at this point, and different pieces and different muscles have to develop a certain way in order to acclimate to the sport you're doing. So in this particular case, everything's, before we get to this step, so like, we're still going through the procedure. They're giving me some options of like, okay, cool, we can stitch you up here, or we can send you to a plastic surgeon. And like my mom immediately goes like, we're gonna go to the plastic surgeon. That's gonna be a good idea. They'll clean them up really nice. I know a couple of plastic surgeons. It's gonna be good. So my mom's like clearly on the phone with like all these different like dermatologists and like plastic surgeons she knows. So she's basically trying to like look outside of this like hospital branch for stuff. And like in my mind, I'm like, well, we could just stay here. I mean, we're already here, right? But like I'm not fully aware of like maybe why this is happening, or like why my mom's trying to branch out and whatnot. And now like at this point in time, you know, the plastic surgeon, the physician's assistant like gives me kind of last kind of outlying options, and they're like, okay, I'll come back and then we'll get you stitched up and we're gonna be good to go. All right. So the physician's assistant leaves, and now like the general admin comes in, and like they get my insurance at this point in time. So like I was conscious enough to like be able to tell my mom like where the insurance was in my wallet, but I don't remember telling her at what point to like that we had that conversation to the administrative assistant of like when they collected my insurance. So it didn't even cross my mind that at this point in time they had my insurance information and things start going kind of south at the hospital. So what I mean by that, and again, thankfully my mom was there because things could be a total mess right now if she wasn't. The physician's assistant obviously comes back and he's like, okay, cool, your EKGs are normal, CT scan shows everything's good, you know, vitals are normal, everything in your blood is good, we're just gonna get you stitched up and we'll get you on your way, right? And then, of course, we did already kind of tell him we were gonna opt in for the plastic surgeon, so he's kind of like all over the place. And then one of his other assistants says, hey, we got some results from the EKG, you wanna check this out? You know, he leaves, cool. I'm still obviously sitting here the whole time for like 2-3 hours with like the ice pack and a tourniquet on my forehead to basically stop the bleeding that's going on. And like a few minutes later, the physician's assistant comes back and he's like, hey, you know how we like took 2 EKGs on you? We decided that like your EKGs were in fact not normal and you're exhibiting signs of something called Brugada syndrome. And now, for those who may or may not know what Brugada syndrome is, I can kind of give you a general explanation of it. And I'll give you the explanation the physician's assistant gave me, and then I'll tell you kind of how this correlates to the big picture, right? So they basically tell me that like basically what Brugada syndrome means is like it's this heart condition that's genetic where you can die just basically at any time because your heart is going to malfunction and you're going to get improper blood flow. So you can like die tomorrow, you could have been dead yesterday, you can die 10 years from now. You're just going to drop dead at some point, so we need you to stop all physical activity until we can put you on a heart rate monitor overnight at this hospital. And now I'm thinking to myself, like, hold on a minute. It's 2-3 p.m., and they want me to stay overnight at this hospital. I'm like, there's no way. Like, I'm basically pleading with them. I'm like, can I just come back tomorrow? Like, I want to get stitched up, and then, like, I can come back tomorrow. We can, like, stay here overnight. But, like, I've got work the next day, and I want to go to work. I've got these, like, cool things I'm trying to work on, and, like, this is going to take time away from that. So, like, I'm still not completely conscious of, like, what's going on, but I do remember, like, at some point the physician's assistant, like, said, okay, let me go talk to, like, you know, my supervisor and let's see what we can do. And at this point, I know for a fact, I look at my mom and I'm like, Mom, you have to get me out of here. We're not staying at this hospital overnight. And, like, now my mom's on the phone with my previous cardiologist from, like, 2016, 2017 in a different hospital branch, but, like, this cardiologist's husband works at the branch we're at, and then, you know, they're trying to play like the politics here of like, hey, tell us what the hell is going on here, because like they're saying that, you know, he came in as like a patient trying to get stitches and now they're trying to turn him into a heart patient after they find out what his insurance can cover. Like, you gotta figure this out. Like, this isn't good at all. So you know, a little bit of time passes, kind of some of it is a blur, but the physician's assistant does come back and say, hey, listen, you have a right to leave this facility, but you'll be going against medical advice. And like at that point, I have a sigh of relief. I'm like, okay, cool. They're not going to keep me contained here with a heart monitor, because that's going to be like the literal worst possible outcome for myself, to be like stuck at this hospital when I'm trying to get stitches from a plastic surgeon outside of the hospital, but they're going to keep me here overnight to monitor my heart. Like, priorities, people, priorities. I'm bleeding from my head. Let's figure this out. So again, let's make this clear. I'm not a medical professional, but based on what I read about Brugada syndrome versus what athletes and runners experience over time in their sport, there are some correlations, right? So now, Brugada syndrome really relies on the fact that it is a small genetic group of people that experience this type of heart condition. But it's also important to note that the main, the root cause of what Brugada syndrome is going to do that ultimately kills you is that you're pushing more blood out of the heart than is able to be taken in. So that means that the atrias, or the atriums, I don't remember the names of the heart, that's the pieces that take in blood, that suck it in, and then the ventricles shoot the blood out. Basically, what I know from some x-rays I took in like 2016, 2017, I was already developing the runner's heart, adaptations by having slightly enlarged ventricles, because at this point your body's trying to pump more blood through the heart to, your legs, your arms, whatever you're using for your body. And the atrias don't usually get too large, to my understanding. And if you're a medical professional and you study, athletes and things like this, please correct me in the comments section if I'm messing something up, or if you're the master of Google searches and you're correcting this on the fly, because I haven't done an extensive amount of research on this. This is just basically anecdotes and things I recall from over time of studying bits and pieces all over the place. But anyways, I digress. The point is they're seeing slightly larger ventricles from the EKG that are responding a different way to basically indicate that maybe these are things that Brugada syndrome patients have, but they're completely disregarding the fact that I've just had anesthesia, just got my wisdom teeth yanked, I have high blood pressure, I'm on adrenaline at this point, I'm an athlete. I literally told them, I run 50, 60 miles a week. They don't put any of this into account, but what they're trying to do is try to keep me in the hospital overnight with a heart rate monitor. So this is kind of almost exploitation of my insurance in a way, from what it sounded like post-analysis when I got home and I was finally kind of getting my conscience back. And just overall, if my mom wasn't there, I could be at this hospital with a heart rate monitor, and they might just have been hey, we don't see anything, you're all good to go, see you later, here's the bill. And it could have ended like that, and nothing would have come of it. But at this point, we got out of the hospital, I end up at the plastic surgeons, they give me more local anesthesia. Basically on the scar, they kind of look at it, they stitch me up, so I get, I think, 7 stitches on my forehead. And I did spend a week just putting some Neosporin on it every so often, being very cautious about showering with it. The plastic surgeons told me to lay low, so I literally spent a week not running. And I think I spent maybe 4 or 5 days doing nothing, no activity, nothing whatsoever, because again, I was just so beat up from experiencing concussion syndromes, which, by the way, they told me I didn't have a concussion at the hospital. So that kind of tells you what the hell was going on here. I'm clearly, sleeping for long periods of time. I'm puking blood and water that I'm trying to consume. I was trying to eat yogurt and I can't keep anything in my stomach down after this procedure. Clearly I was concussed. And basically, again, I wasn't working out for 4 or 5 days, but I was gradually getting better to the point where I was able to get on my bike on one of the warmer days, and I went for a few rides here and there, and it was good. I didn't feel any problems or anything like that, and because biking is low impact, it didn't really bother me all too much. And basically the following week after the wisdom tooth and hospital day, I did get my stitches pulled out. They gave me, these sterile strips, and I got a ton of them here. And that's basically what I'm doing now. I'm about a week into using the sterile strips to cover up the scar that I had on my head, and it's healing up really well. I'm feeling a lot better. Running is feeling a lot better. The only thing is I have zero confidence when I'm at the gym when it comes to approaching and talking to people. Not that I had much confidence to begin with, but I definitely have zero now because I've got this, sterile strip on my forehead. I'm I feel I'm physically less appealing than I was previously. So I digress. And the point here is now I'm just recovering, and I'm still not allowed to swim. I wasn't allowed to swim while I had the stitches. I can't submerge the scar. I can shower like normal, which is cool. The sterile strip is waterproof, so it doesn't really absorb any water or keep any water on my forehead. And I guess the play here now is to see what happens a week from now if I have a visible scar if they're going to do any sort of like post procedures, like maybe like laser or like scraping of the skin to kind of clean it up, because there's a lot that they're going to do after this thing is like 100% healed to basically the 80% thickness that the skin should be over versus the 100% that like your skin is kind of normally. So that's kind of my wisdom tooth story of how I got my wisdom teeth pulled out. I fainted, I bumped my head on tiles, and basically was almost admitted as a heart patient to a hospital I went to over things that they couldn't quite prove, but they wanted to monitor for those specific conditions. So basically, yeah, steps moving forward here, of course, is like, I am running. Once again, I am doing physical activity, no problems whatsoever. Everything looks great. Running's cool, biking's cool, weightlifting's cool. The only things now is like I do have to schedule with my previous cardiologist to kind of get some things sorted out. Just, you know, as an air of caution, just to make sure there isn't really any heart conditions going on. Because the last time I saw this cardiologist in 2017, like she, you know, she did the EKGs on me. She was like asking me questions, and like 6 or 7 questions into her questionnaire, she stops for a moment and she's like, "Why are you here again? Like, you're literally okay. Like, as long as you're not drinking energy drinks, you're good to go." And like, my interpretation of that is like, as long as I'm not drinking like Monster, Red Bull, like things like that, I guess I'm okay, is what she was saying. Because she said energy drinks kind of broadly, so that's kind of my assumption of it. But again, that was like her one condition. It was like, as long as you're not drinking energy drinks and you're like, you know, running and doing stuff, you're good. So I'm going to have to pay a visit to her again and just be like, hey, this is all the new stuff. Check out my new EKG. Check out my cool heart. Whoa, are you interested now in like things going on? Because she was like telling me, she's like, yeah, if these specific conditions are met, I'm not going to be interested in your heart whatsoever. And yeah, that's probably one of the most friend-zoning things I've ever heard in my life from any lady doctor that has ever said anything to me. So I got a kick out of that. But anyways, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. And then next week, we got to see what this is going on with the scar. But I am good now. I'm getting better when it comes to terms of this forehead, getting back into physical shape again. I do have the Chicago half marathon in like a month from now, and I'm definitely behind on that training. But, you know, it is what it is. I have tons of videos on my list over there that I still have to put together. So, yeah, lots going on. But that's the update I wanted to give you. Hopefully you stuck around for this 25-minute video of my insane wisdom tooth story. And hopefully you don't make the same mistakes I do or did during the wisdom tooth operation. And you just take your time after you get your teeth pulled. And yeah, it'll be pretty good. So, thanks again for watching this video. Stand by for updates. I'll have some more as they come around, and I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.